I always thought Daniel and I had the perfect marriage. 15 years together, a beautiful son, a home we built with our own hands on the edge of Lakeside. Everyone said we were the couple who'd grow old together on our porch swing, watching the sunset over the mountains. Then came the day my doctor called with the results of my biopsy. Stage 3 breast cancer. And just like that, my perfect life shattered into 1,000 jagged pieces. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I can't do this, Jen, Daniel told me, 3 weeks into my chemotherapy. His eyes wouldn't meet mine as he stuffed shirts into a suitcase. I'm not strong enough to watch you suffer. I need space to figure things out. What he really needed was Megan, his college girlfriend. I found out later they'd been texting for months. She was waiting for him, arms open, the moment he walked out our door. But what Daniel didn't realize when he abandoned me at my weakest moment, he never read the fine print on our insurance policy, the one that listed me as the sole beneficiary of a $5 million life insurance plan, the one that contained our property rider, the one that would end up changing everything. This is how I lost my husband, fought for my life, and found something I never expected along the way, my own worth. I met Daniel Hayes during my junior year at Colorado State. He was the handsome teaching assistant in my environmental science class, tall, confident, with kind brown eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Our first date was a hike up to Eagle's Nest, where we watched the sunrise and talked until our voices grew hoarse. "You're different from anyone I've ever met, Jen," he told me that morning, his face golden in the dawn light. "You see the world exactly the way I do." We married 2 years later in a small ceremony by Lakeside's shore. I still remember how the water glittered behind us as we said our vows, how certain I felt that I'd found my forever person. Nathan came along 3 years after that, our miracle baby after months of trying. Daniel cried when he first held him, this strong man suddenly vulnerable with emotion. "Our family," he whispered, cradling Nathan against his chest. "Nothing will ever be more important to me than you two." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? We built our life together deliberately, each decision a shared one. When Daniel wanted to leave his corporate job to start his own real estate business, I supported him, taking extra shifts at the high school where I taught English to help cover our expenses during the lean months. When I suggested we build rather than buy, Daniel spent weekends learning carpentry, determined to create something special for us. Our cabin on Pinecrest Road became our masterpiece. 3 bedrooms, a wraparound porch, windows that framed the mountains like paintings. We finished it just before Nathan started kindergarten. Every nail, every board represented years of saving and dreaming. "This is our legacy," Daniel said proudly on move-in day, his arm around my waist. "Something we built with our own hands." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan grew from a chubby-cheeked boy into a thoughtful 10-year-old who loved science and soccer. Daniel's real estate business flourished. Sunview Realty became one of the most respected agencies in Lakeside. I earned tenure at Mountain Ridge High, teaching literature to teenagers who sometimes surprised me with their insight. We had friends, family gatherings, holiday traditions. We had inside jokes and favorite restaurants, and a shared calendar filled with Nathan's activities. We had arguments too, of course, but they never seemed serious. We always found our way back to each other. "You're my rock, Jen," Daniel told me on our 15th anniversary as we shared dessert at Lakeside's fanciest restaurant. "I don't know what I'd do without you." The first sign that something might be wrong came in small ways. Daniel working later, checking his phone more often, growing distant in conversations. I attributed it to stress from his expanding business. When he suggested separate vacations, him a golf trip with clients, me a beach weekend with friends, I didn't question it. We were secure enough for independence, weren't we? Then came the mammogram. A routine checkup that felt anything but routine when the technician's face changed, when she called the doctor in for a second look, when words like abnormality and further testing entered the conversation. "It's probably nothing," I told Daniel that night, trying to keep my voice steady. "They just want to be thorough." He hugged me, but something felt off. His embrace slightly stiff, his reassurance a beat too delayed. "Whatever happens, we'll handle it together," he said. 1 week later, I sat in Dr. Chen's office, listening as she explained my diagnosis. Invasive ductal carcinoma. Stage 3. Aggressive. "We need to start treatment immediately," she said gently. "But Jennifer, I want you to know we have excellent protocols for this. Many women with similar diagnoses go on to live long, healthy lives." I nodded, trying to absorb what she was telling me. My mind raced to practical concerns. How would I continue teaching? What would we tell Nathan? Could we afford this? How would Daniel cope? When I called him from the hospital parking lot, his response seemed appropriate. Shock, concern, promises to be by my side. He even met me at home early, hugging me tightly as I collapsed into tears. "We're going to beat this," he whispered fiercely. "I'll handle everything else. You just focus on getting better." For the first 2 weeks, Daniel was perfect. He researched cancer treatments late into the night, joined me at appointments, took notes while I sat numb with fear. He cooked meals I couldn't eat, rubbed my back when I was sick from the first round of chemo, reassured Nathan with a calm I couldn't muster. "Your mom is the strongest person I know," I overheard him telling our son. "And the doctors are helping her fight the bad cells. She's going to be okay." But by the 3rd week, something changed. Daniel started making excuses to miss my appointments, important clients, unsellable meetings. He slept in the guest room, claiming he didn't want to disturb me. He grew quiet at dinner, his eyes distant, his responses mechanical. Then one evening, after putting Nathan to bed, I found Daniel in our bedroom with a suitcase open on the bed. "What are you doing?" I asked, though some part of me already knew. He couldn't look at me as he folded a sweater with painstaking precision. "I need some time, Jen. It's too much." "Too much?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. "What's too much, Daniel? My cancer? The fact that I might die?" "Don't say that." He flinched, finally meeting my eyes. "You're not going to die." "Then why are you packing?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "I can't explain it. I feel like I can't breathe. Like I'm failing you because I don't know how to handle this." "So your solution is to leave?" The room seemed to tilt around me. "That's how you handle it?" "It's temporary," he insisted, though his actions suggested otherwise. "I just need space to clear my head, to be stronger for you and Nathan." I sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly too exhausted to stand. The chemo had left me drained, my body no longer entirely my own. "Where will you go?" He hesitated, and in that pause, I heard the truth he wasn't saying. "It's Megan, isn't it?" The name felt bitter on my tongue. His college girlfriend. The one he'd dated for 3 years before me. The one who'd moved back to Lakeside last summer. His silence was confirmation enough. "How long?" I asked. "It's not what you think. We've just been talking." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "She understands what I'm going through." I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor. "What you're going through?" "Daniel, I'm the one with cancer." "I know." He zipped the suitcase closed. "I know how selfish this sounds. I hate myself for it. But I need to figure things out before I can be what you need." "Nathan, I'll explain it to him. I'll tell him I'm not leaving him, just..." taking a break. He can stay with me on weekends. I stood then, anger temporarily overcoming weakness. You don't get to make these decisions unilaterally. You don't get to tear apart our son's world because you're scared. Jen, please. His voice broke. I'm trying to be honest with you. No, you're trying to abandon your vows. In sickness and in health. Remember those words, Daniel? They weren't just pretty phrases for our wedding photos. He picked up the suitcase. I'll call you tomorrow. We'll figure out the details then. And just like that, he walked out. 15 years of marriage, condensed to a 5-minute conversation and the sound of his car starting in the driveway. I sank to the floor, my body shaking with sobs I couldn't control. How was this happening? How could the man who'd promised to love me forever leave the moment I needed him most? Later that night, after crying until I had no tears left, I called Olivia. She arrived within 20 minutes, her face a mask of fury when I explained what had happened. That absolute bastard, she fumed, pulling me into a fierce hug. Let me stay with you tonight. You shouldn't be alone. Nathan? We'll be fine. Seeing his favorite aunt at breakfast. We'll figure out what to tell him tomorrow. She helped me to bed, bringing water and the anti-nausea medication I needed to take. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I heard her on the phone in the hallway, her voice low but intense. I don't care what excuses he's making, Thomas. He's left her while she's going through chemo. No, I'm staying here tonight. Yes, of course I'll keep you updated. Thomas Bennett. Olivia's boyfriend and coincidentally our insurance agent. The man who'd helped us set up our policies years ago, who'd insisted we upgrade our coverage when Daniel's business took off. I didn't know it then, but Thomas would become one of the most important figures in what happened next. Because while Daniel was walking away from our marriage, he'd forgotten one crucial detail. He'd never actually read the fine print of the policies he'd signed. And in that oversight lay the first seed of my unexpected reclamation. Part 2. The breaking telling. Nathan that his father had moved out was the hardest conversation of my life. Harder even than explaining my cancer diagnosis. Because at least, with cancer, I could promise him I was fighting to stay. With Daniel's departure, I couldn't promise anything would return to normal. But why can't Dad fight with you? Nathan asked, his voice small, his eyes huge with confusion. When Joey's mom got sick, his whole family stayed together. How do you explain adult selfishness to a 10-year-old? How do you protect a child from the knowledge that sometimes people choose the easier path, even when it hurts those they claim to love? Dad is struggling right now, I finally said, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups don't handle scary situations well. He still loves you very much. That hasn't changed. Is it because of your hair? Nathan asked, reaching out to touch my scarf-covered head. I'd shaved it the week before, after clumps began falling out during my shower. My heart broke all over again. No, sweetie, it's not because of how I look. But later that week when Daniel came to pick up Nathan for their first weekend visit, I caught him staring at me with something like revulsion in his eyes. My body had changed so quickly, 20 pounds lost, skin gray, dark circles under my eyes. I hardly recognized myself. Why should he? You look, he started, then stopped himself. Sick? I supplied. That's generally what happens during cancer treatment. He flinched. I was going to say tired. Do you need help with anything before we go? We've been managing without you for 2 weeks. I think we can handle a weekend. His mouth tightened. Jen, I'm trying here. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've moved in with your ex-girlfriend while your wife undergoes chemotherapy. That's a strange definition of trying. Nathan appeared then, backpack slung over one shoulder, saving Daniel from responding. The forced cheerfulness in my husband's voice as he greeted our son made me physically ill. After they left, Olivia arrived with grocery bags and a determined expression. She'd been my lifeline, organizing a meal train among our friends, driving me to treatments when fatigue made it impossible to drive myself, staying over when the side effects were at their worst. Thomas is coming by later, she mentioned casually, unpacking containers of homemade soup. He has some questions about your insurance paperwork. I sighed, too exhausted to deal with administrative details. Can't Daniel handle that? It's his policy, too. Olivia's expression darkened. Thomas seems to think there might be complications. Given the separation. We're not separated. He's figuring things out, remember? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. When Thomas arrived that evening, his professional demeanor couldn't quite hide his concern. He'd known Daniel and me for years, had come to our barbecues, celebrated Nathan's birthdays. Jennifer, he said, setting his briefcase on the dining table. How are you feeling today? It was a loaded question. Physically awful, emotionally devastated, financially terrified. I've been better, I said simply. He nodded, understanding all I wasn't saying. I need to discuss some important matters. Regarding your insurance situation, given Daniel's current living arrangements, there are provisions we should address. For the next hour, Thomas walked me through documents I'd signed years ago but never fully comprehended. Our life insurance policies, our property insurance, the riders and clauses and addendums that suddenly seemed critically important. Here's what you need to understand, Thomas said, pointing to a specific paragraph. When Daniel established his business, we set up a specialized policy to protect your family assets. You're listed as the primary beneficiary, with full rights to all covered properties and financial instruments in the event of his death, or, he paused, his finger underlining a particular sentence, permanent separation. I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. What exactly does that mean? It means that if Daniel chooses to legally separate from you, control of the policy and its benefits transfers exclusively to you, including the property rider covering your home and the cabin in Grand Lake. The cabin, our vacation property, that Daniel's parents had helped us purchase as an investment. The one place Daniel loved more than our main home. That can't be right, I said. Daniel would never have agreed to that. Thomas's smile was thin. He didn't read the fine print. When I suggested this provision, he was focused on expanding. Sunview. He signed where I indicated, assuming it was standard language. Olivia, who had been silently listening, spoke up. Is that even legal? Completely, Thomas confirmed, and ethically sound. The provision was designed to protect Jennifer and Nathan from business creditors in worst-case scenarios. It just happens to apply equally well to current circumstances. I rubbed my temples, trying to think through the fog of chemo drugs. So what are you suggesting I do with this information? Thomas closed his briefcase with a decisive click. Nothing for the moment. But Daniel contacted me yesterday, asking about changing beneficiaries on his life insurance. I felt you should be aware of your actual legal position before he makes any ill-informed decisions. After Thomas left, Olivia sat beside me on the couch, her expression thoughtful. You realize what this means, right? Daniel can't just walk away without consequences. I don't want to trap him, I said quietly, if he doesn't want to be with me. This isn't about wanting, Olivia interrupted fiercely. This is about responsibility. He made vows. He signed contracts. He doesn't get to abandon those, because things got difficult. I looked down at my thin wrists, the veins prominent beneath pale skin. Do you think he's coming back? Once the shock wears off? Her silence told me everything. The answer became clearer the following week, when Daniel arrived to drop Nathan off. He lingered in the doorway, seemingly working up to something important. Jen, we need to talk about practical arrangements, he finally said. I've been looking at apartments closer to Nathan's school, but in the meantime, you're staying with Megan, I finished for him. Let's not pretend otherwise. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. It's complicated. No, it's actually quite simple. You've chosen someone else over your family. That's not fair. I'm still committed to being Nathan's father. Part-time. Parenting isn't the same as being there every day, but you've made your choice. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. Look, I came to discuss finances. I know you're worried about medical bills. I've spoken with my accountant, and I can provide monthly support that should cover— I don't want your money, I cut in, surprising myself with the conviction in my voice. I want my husband, but since that's apparently not an option, I'll manage on my own. Don't be stubborn. Your medical leave won't cover everything. I'm trying to do the right thing here. I laughed, a hollow sound. The right thing? Daniel, you left me 3 weeks into chemotherapy. You moved in with your ex-girlfriend. You've blown up our son's sense of security when he needed it most. Don't talk to me about doing the right thing. His expression hardened. I see Thomas has been filling your head with ideas. He called me, you know, making veiled threats about insurance policies and legal obligations. Thomas is doing his job, something you seem to have forgotten about. Is that what this is about? You think I've abandoned my responsibilities? I'm offering financial support, regular time with Nathan. What you're offering are crumbs, I said quietly. Pieces of what should have been whole. Go back to Megan, Daniel. We'll discuss the rest through lawyers. His eyes widened. Lawyers? Jen, we don't need to make this adversarial. You made it adversarial the moment you packed your suitcase. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the family photos still displayed on our refrigerator. Happy moments frozen in time, camping trips, birthdays, beach vacations. A family that no longer existed. The next day brought new troubles. Daniel's mother, Patricia, called, her voice tight with disapproval. Jennifer, we need to discuss what's happening. Daniel says you're being unreasonable about visitation schedules. I gripped the phone tighter. Hello to you too, Patricia. Yes, my cancer treatment is going as well as can be expected. Thanks for asking. Her brief pause suggested at least a flicker of shame. Of course we're concerned about your health, but we're also concerned about this situation with Daniel. He says you're threatening legal action? I mentioned lawyers might be necessary to formalize our arrangements. Hardly a threat. He's under tremendous stress, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken. First your diagnosis, then this. Separation. He needs support right now, not hostility. The absurdity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. When I found my voice, it was dangerously calm. Let me make sure I understand, Patricia. Your son abandoned his cancer-stricken wife for another woman, and I'm supposed to worry about his stress levels? That's not. You're twisting the situation. He's confused, overwhelmed. If you could just be patient. Patient? While he figures things out in another woman's bed? That's asking quite a lot, don't you think? I've always appreciated your directness, Jennifer, but this bitterness isn't helpful. For Nathan's sake, we should all try to maintain civility. I agree completely, which is why I expect you and Richard to explain to Nathan why his weekly visits to your house will now include Daddy's special friend Megan. I'm sure you can find a civil way to frame that particular arrangement. Patricia's sharp intake of breath told me I'd hit a nerve. Daniel wouldn't bring her around Nathan so soon. No? Well, that's between you and your son, just like my legal decisions are between me and my lawyers. After ending the call, I sat in stunned silence. The woman who'd once welcomed me into her family, who'd helped decorate Nathan's nursery and taught me her secret recipe for apple pie, now viewed me as the antagonist in her son's drama. As if my cancer and Daniel's betrayal were equal inconveniences disrupting their family harmony. Later that evening, my phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry about what Daniel is putting you through. I want you to—" "No, I never would have reconnected with him if I'd known about your diagnosis. This isn't who I thought he was." Megan. I stared at the message, emotions churning. Was this meant to make me feel better? To absolve her of guilt? I deleted it without responding. The next morning, I woke to find Nathan sitting at the foot of my bed, his expression solemn. "Mom, are you going to die?" The question knocked the breath from my lungs. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "I heard Grandma on the phone. She said Dad left because he can't handle watching you die." In that moment, something hardened inside me. A resolve that cut through fatigue and heartbreak with crystalline clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my son, who deserved better than to have his world dismantled by adult weakness. "Nathan, look at me," I said, sitting up and taking his hands in mine. "I am not planning to die. I'm fighting this cancer with everything I have, and the doctors are helping me. What Grandma said was wrong. Dad didn't leave because I'm sick. He left because he made choices that have nothing to do with you or even with my illness. But he's not coming back, is he?" The simple question deserved an honest answer. "I don't think so, no." Nathan nodded, absorbing this truth with a maturity that broke my heart. "Then we'll be okay without him." It wasn't a question. It was a declaration, one that echoed my own emerging conviction. We would indeed be okay without Daniel Hayes. And perhaps, in ways I couldn't yet imagine, we might eventually be more than okay. That afternoon, I called Thomas Bennett and asked him to walk me through every detail of our insurance policies again. This time, I took notes. "I need to understand exactly what options I have," I told him. "Not just for protection, but for leverage." Thomas's smile was knowing. "I was hoping you'd call. There are several provisions I think you'll find particularly interesting." By the time our conversation ended, I had a much clearer understanding of the financial infrastructure Daniel had inadvertently built, and the power it gave me to protect what was rightfully mine. The weeks that followed Daniel's departure blurred together in a haze of medical appointments and legal consultations. My body waged war against both cancer and chemotherapy, while my mind struggled to reconcile the collapse of my marriage with the practical realities of single parenthood. Some mornings, the simple act of getting Nathan to school felt like scaling a mountain. But mountains, as it turns out, can be climbed one step at a time. Thomas became my unexpected guide through the labyrinth of financial entanglements Daniel had left behind. We met weekly at my kitchen table, surrounded by policy documents and legal pads filled with notes. "The property rider is particularly interesting," Thomas explained during one such session, sliding a document toward me. "When you purchased the cabin in Grand Lake, Daniel added it to your homeowner's policy under a special provision, joint tenancy with right of survivorship." "Which means what exactly?" I asked, pushing aside a half-empty cup of ginger tea. The nausea had been particularly bad that day, making it difficult to focus. "It means the property is indivisible. Neither owner can sell or transfer their interest without the other's consent, and if one owner leaves the picture, the other automatically inherits full ownership." I raised an eyebrow. "Leaves the picture? You mean dies?" "Not necessarily," Thomas replied, his expression carefully neutral. "The provision also applies if one party breaches the terms of joint ownership, which, according to this writer, includes abandonment of the family residence for more than 60 days without mutual agreement." I stared at him, processing the implications. "Daniel signed this?" "He did. It was his idea, actually, a way to protect the property from business creditors. He was quite concerned about asset protection when Sunview was just getting started. And now? Now he's been gone for 47 days. In 13 more, if he hasn't returned to the family residence, legal ownership of both properties would transfer solely to you. I pushed the document away, suddenly uneasy. This feels like a trap. It's not a trap, Jennifer. It's a legal mechanism Daniel himself put in place. He simply never imagined it would apply to him. I thought of the cabin, the Riverstone fireplace, the pine-scented air, the view of the lake from the back deck. It had been Daniel's sanctuary, his pride and joy. The place where Nathan caught his first fish, where we spent Christmas mornings opening presents in our pajamas. "He'll fight this," I said quietly. Thomas nodded, his face somber. "Yes, once he realizes the situation. But the language is quite clear, and he signed it willingly. These aren't technicalities, Jennifer. They're contractual obligations he entered into freely." That evening after Nathan was asleep, I sat on the porch swing Daniel had built for our 10th anniversary. The night air carried a hint of pine and distant wood smoke, reminiscent of our cabin. I thought about Thomas's revelations, about the unexpected power I now held, and wondered if using it would make me no better than Daniel. Then my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. "Megan and I are taking Nathan to the cabin next weekend. Pack his fishing gear. Not a request, not a conversation. A statement of entitlement from the man who'd walked away from our family but still expected access to all its benefits." I typed back, "We need to talk first, in person." His response came, quickly. "About what?" "I'm trying to maintain normalcy for Nathan. The cabin has always been part of his life. So was having his parents in the same house. Things change. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Don't make this difficult, Jen. I'm trying my best here." I turned off my phone without responding, the decision crystallizing in my mind. Daniel needed to understand that choices had consequences, that trying his best wasn't enough when his best involved abandoning his wife during cancer treatment. The following day, I contacted a family lawyer Olivia had recommended, Catherine Walsh, a formidable woman with a reputation for protecting vulnerable spouses during separation proceedings. "So he left you during cancer treatment, moved in with another woman, and now wants to take your son to your jointly owned vacation property," Catherine summarized after I explained the situation. "And he's unaware of the 60-day abandonment clause in your property rider." "Yes," I confirmed. "Thomas Bennett, our insurance agent, brought it to my attention." Catherine made a note on her legal pad. "Thomas Bennett. I know him." "Good." "Man, very detail-oriented." She looked up, her gaze direct. "Jennifer, I need to ask you something important. What do you want out of this situation? Revenge? Financial security? Co-parenting stability? Your answer will determine how we proceed." The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on surviving, the cancer, the betrayal, the day-to-day challenges, that I hadn't fully articulated my longer-term goals. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I want Nathan to be secure. I want to keep our home. I want Daniel to understand that he can't just discard his responsibilities and still enjoy the privileges of family life. And the cabin? It sounds like a significant asset. I thought about the memories embedded in that place, both beautiful and, now, painful. I don't know. Part of me wants to keep it for Nathan's sake. Part of me never wants to set foot there again. Catherine nodded. "Here's what I suggest. We don't reveal the abandonment clause yet. Instead, we use it as leverage to negotiate a comprehensive separation agreement that protects your interests. The cabin can be a bargaining chip." "That feels manipulative," I admitted. "It's strategic," she corrected gently. "Daniel made choices that prioritized his needs over your family's well-being. You're simply ensuring those choices don't also destroy your financial security and your son's future." I left Catherine's office with a clearer sense of direction and a scheduled meeting with Daniel for the following day. When I texted him to confirm, his response was terse. Fine. 2 p.m. But I'm bringing my lawyer. His lawyer turned out to be Martin Reynolds, a silver-haired man with an expensive suit and a reputation for representing Lakeside's wealthiest divorce clients. We met at Catherine's office, the four of us seated around a conference table that suddenly felt like a battlefield. Let's be clear about why we're here, Martin began, his tone smoothly professional. Daniel wants to formalize temporary arrangements for Nathan's care and visitation while you both decide next steps. He's offering generous financial support during this difficult time. Catherine placed a hand on my arm, a subtle signal to let her respond. We appreciate that, Martin, but before discussing specifics, we need to address some concerning patterns. Daniel has been making unilateral decisions about family assets without consultation, specifically planning trips to jointly owned property without Jennifer's input or consent. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. The cabin has always been a family place. I didn't think it would be an issue. It became an issue, I said quietly. When you decided we weren't a family anymore, Martin interjected smoothly. Obviously, emotions are running high, but the cabin is jointly owned. Daniel has every legal right to use it. Actually, Catherine replied, sliding a document across the table, that's not entirely accurate. I'd like you both to review paragraph 7 of the property rider attached to the Hayes' homeowner's policy. I watched Daniel's face as he read the document, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. This can't be enforceable, he said, looking up at Martin. I never agreed to this. Martin took the document, scanning it with narrowed eyes. Where did this come from? It's been in place for years, Catherine answered, since the cabin was purchased and added to the family's insurance policy. Daniel signed it himself. I never read this part, Daniel protested, color rising in his face. Thomas never explained. Thomas did his job, I interrupted. You chose not to read what you were signing. That's hardly his fault. Martin and Catherine exchanged glances, the dynamic in the room shifting perceptibly. Let's take a step back, Martin suggested. What exactly are you proposing here, Catherine? We're proposing a fair and comprehensive separation agreement that acknowledges Jennifer's current health challenges and prioritizes Nathan's stability. This would include Jennifer retaining the family home, primary custody of Nathan with generous visitation for Daniel, and adequate financial support during Jennifer's recovery and treatment. And the cabin? Daniel asked, his voice tight. Catherine looked at me, letting me answer. I don't want to take the cabin from you, Daniel, but I do want you to understand that actions have consequences. You can't dismantle our family and still expect everything to remain convenient for you. So you're using this clause to blackmail me? No, I said firmly. I'm asking you to see this situation from my perspective. You left me during cancer treatment to be with another woman. Now you want to take our son to our family cabin with that woman. Can you understand why that feels wrong to me? The room fell silent. Martin whispered something to Daniel, who shook his head sharply. What do you want, Jen? Daniel finally asked, his tone defeated. I want us to create a formal separation agreement that protects Nathan and ensures I can focus on my health without constant financial worry. Once that's in place, we can discuss shared use of the cabin, with appropriate boundaries. Daniel looked away, jaw tight. And if I refuse? Then in 13 days, according to that document you signed, sole ownership of both properties will transfer to Jennifer, Catherine stated matter-of-factly. I don't think that's the outcome anyone wants. The meeting ended with an agreement to draft terms, but Daniel's parting look, a mixture of betrayal and resentment, stayed with me. As did his final words, delivered in a low voice as we left the conference room. I never thought you'd use legal technicalities against me. This isn't you, Jen. Cancer isn't me either, I replied quietly. Neither is being abandoned by my husband. We're both doing things we never anticipated. That night, the enormity of what had transpired hit me hard. I sat on the bathroom floor after a particularly brutal round of post-chemo nausea, too weak to stand, wondering if I'd crossed some moral line. Was I using Daniel's oversight against him unfairly? Was I becoming bitter, vindictive, the angry cancer patient people would whisper about with pity? A gentle knock on the bathroom door interrupted my thoughts. "Mom?" Nathan called softly. "Can I come in?" I quickly wiped my mouth and flushed the toilet. "Just a minute, sweetheart." After rinsing my face and mouth, I opened the door to find my son standing there in pajamas, his expression solemn. "I brought you some water," he said, offering a glass. "Olivia said it helps after you get sick." I took the glass, tears welling in my eyes at this simple act of care from my 10-year-old. "Thank you. That was very thoughtful." Nathan watched me drink, then asked hesitantly, "Are you and Dad fighting about the cabin?" My heart sank. "You heard that?" He nodded. "On the phone. Dad said you're being unfair about the cabin, and Grandma said you're trying to punish him." I sighed, setting the glass down and leading Nathan to his bedroom. We sat together on his bed, surrounded by space posters and soccer trophies. "It's complicated, Nathan. When grown-ups separate, there are a lot of decisions to make about houses and money and schedules. Sometimes those discussions get heated. But why can't we all just go to the cabin like before? Dad said he wants to take me fishing next weekend." The innocent question pierced my heart. How could I explain the complexities of betrayal and boundaries to a child who just wanted his family back? "Nathan, I need you to understand something important. I would never keep you from spending time with your dad. Never. But right now, we're figuring out new ways to be a family, one that lives in different houses. During this transition, some things might change, including how we use the cabin." "Because of Megan?" he asked, surprising me with his perception. "Partly," I admitted. "And partly because I'm not feeling well enough for cabin trips right now. Would you be okay with fishing at Lakeside Pier with your dad instead, just for now?" Nathan considered this, then nodded. "I guess. But when you're better, can we go back to the cabin? All of us?" The question hung in the air, laden with impossibilities I couldn't explain. "We'll figure something out," I promised, knowing it wasn't really an answer. After tucking Nathan in, I called Olivia, desperate for the perspective of someone who knew me before I became a cancer patient, before I became a woman fighting for financial survival. "You're doing what you need to do," she reassured me after I explained my doubts. "Daniel made choices that put you in this position. You're not being vindictive. You're being smart." Nathan asked if we could all go back to the cabin together. "When I'm better," I said, my voice catching. "How do I tell him that's never going to happen?" "One day at a time, Jen. Kids are resilient. Right now, focus on your treatment and securing what you need. The emotional pieces will fall into place later." The next day brought unexpected developments. Thomas called, his voice carefully professional, but with an undercurrent of concern. "Jennifer, I wanted to give you a heads up. Daniel came to the office this morning, demanding copies of all policy documents and claiming I deliberately misled him about certain provisions." "I'm sorry, Thomas. I never meant to put you in an awkward position. Don't apologize. I did my job correctly. But there's something else you should know. He's trying to amend the property rider retroactively. He's claiming he signed under false pretenses." My stomach tightened. "Can he do that?" "No, not legally. But he's making a lot of noise, threatening to report me to the Insurance Commission for ethical violations. It won't stick, but I thought you should be prepared." After hanging up, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the calendar on the wall. 10 more days until the 60-day mark. 10 days during which Daniel would likely escalate his efforts to undermine the property clause. Sure enough, that afternoon, Daniel texted, "We need to talk ASAP. This property rider situation is a mistake. Thomas misled me." I didn't respond immediately, consulting with Catherine first. Her advice was clear. Maintain written communications only, document everything, and don't agree to changes without legal review. I finally replied, any concerns about the property rider should go through our lawyers. I'm focusing on my health right now. His response was immediate and heated. This isn't you, Jen. You're letting lawyers and insurance agents turn this into something ugly. We can work this out between us like we always have. The irony of his appeal to our past problem-solving dynamic wasn't lost on me. Like we worked out your decision to leave during my cancer treatment? Or your move to Megan's house? Those didn't involve much discussion. That's not fair. I was in shock. I made mistakes. But using legal loopholes to take the cabin isn't the answer. I put the phone down, suddenly exhausted by the circular nature of our communication. Daniel wanted the freedom to leave without losing the benefits of what he was leaving behind. He wanted me to prioritize his feelings while he disregarded mine. He wanted me to be the understanding, accommodating Jennifer I'd always been. Even as cancer and betrayal transformed me into someone with harder edges and stronger boundaries. Later that evening, Patricia called, her voice sharp with accusation. Jennifer, what are you doing? Daniel told us about this ridiculous property clause you're trying to use against him. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that she was Nathan's grandmother, a relationship worth preserving despite the circumstances. Hello, Patricia. I'm doing as well as can be expected with the chemo. Thank you for asking. Her momentary silence acknowledged the pointed reminder. Of course we're concerned about your health, but this legal maneuvering? It's beneath you, Jennifer. The cabin has been part of our family heritage. Richard and I contributed to its purchase. I'm aware of that contribution. $20,000 toward the down payment, which Daniel and I appreciated enormously. The remaining $430,000 came from our joint savings, primarily funded by my teaching salary while Daniel built his business. That's hardly the point, Patricia sputtered. The cabin was always meant to stay in the family. I am family, I reminded her quietly. Or at least I was until Daniel decided otherwise. He's going through a difficult time. So am I interrupted, my patience finally wearing thin. I'm going through cancer treatment without my husband's support because he chose to move in with another woman. If we're comparing difficult times, Patricia, I think mine might edge out Daniel's midlife crisis. This vindictiveness isn't helping. Anyone, she insisted, especially not Nathan. You know what would help Nathan? Having his father honor his commitments. Having his grandparents acknowledge that his mother is fighting for her life while his father abandoned ship. Having adults who demonstrate that promises and vows actually mean something. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken accusations. Finally, Patricia spoke, her voice strained. Richard and I want to see Nathan this weekend. Will that be a problem? Of course not. Nathan loves you both, and that hasn't changed. You're welcome to pick him up Saturday morning. I only ask that you don't disparage me in front of him or make promises about the cabin that might not be kept. After ending the call, I found myself trembling. From anger, from exhaustion, from the relentless chemical assault on my body. I curled up on the couch, pulling a blanket around my shoulders, and allowed myself the luxury of tears. How had everything fallen apart so completely? 6 months ago, I'd been a happily married teacher with a loving family and a future that seemed secure. Now I was a cancer patient, fighting legal battles with the man who had promised to love me through sickness and health. The next morning brought new challenges. Dr. Chen called with my latest test results, her voice carefully neutral. The tumor isn't responding to the current chemotherapy protocol as well as we'd hoped, Jennifer. I'd like to discuss adjusting your treatment plan. I sat at the kitchen table, phone pressed to my ear, listening as she outlined more aggressive options, stronger drugs, more frequent infusions, additional medications to counter the escalating side effects. What about my teaching? I asked. thinking of the fall semester I'd hoped to return for. Will I be able to go back to work in September with this new protocol? Dr. Chen's hesitation told me everything. Let's focus on your response to treatment. Before making plans, the next 3 months will be crucial. 3 more months of intense treatment. 3 more months of being too sick to work, too weak to maintain normalcy for Nathan. 3 more months of financial strain that Daniel's generous support didn't fully address. The conversation with Dr. Chen crystallized something I'd been avoiding. This wasn't a temporary setback. Cancer had rewritten the script of my life in ways that went beyond my marriage. My career, my independence, my future, all hung in the balance. That afternoon, I met with Catherine to review the draft separation agreement her office had prepared. The terms were comprehensive. I would retain the family home and primary custody of Nathan. Daniel would continue Nathan's health, insurance coverage, and provide monthly support. Our retirement accounts would remain separate, and the cabin. We've included a conditional joint ownership clause for the Grand Lake property, Catherine explained, pointing to the relevant section. You maintain primary ownership, but Daniel has guaranteed usage rights provided he meets his other obligations under the agreement. I studied the document, trying to see beyond the legal language to the life it outlined. This is fair, I said finally. More than fair, considering the circumstances. Catherine looked surprised. Most clients in your position would push for more, especially given the abandonment clause leverage. I shook my head. I don't want to strip Daniel of everything. I just want security for Nathan and myself during my treatment and recovery. And I want Daniel to understand that actions have consequences. He may not see it that way, Catherine warned. Men like Daniel often expect to maintain all the benefits of family life while pursuing their personal freedom. Then that's his problem to work through, I said, signing the document. I've spent 15 years accommodating Daniel's needs and expectations. I don't have the energy to do that anymore. Catherine gathered the signed papers, her expression thoughtful. You've changed since our first meeting. There's a clarity to your decisions now. I considered this, realizing she was right. Something had shifted in me, not just physically from the cancer treatment, but emotionally and psychologically. The woman who had built her life around being Daniel's supportive wife and Nathan's nurturing mother was evolving into someone who recognized her own worth independent of those roles. Cancer changes your perspective, I said simply. So does betrayal. The next day, Martin Reynolds called Catherine to arrange a meeting for Daniel to review the separation agreement. The timing wasn't accidental. 7 days remained until the 60-day abandonment clause would take effect. Daniel was feeling the pressure. We met again in Catherine's office, the tension palpable as Daniel reviewed the document, his lawyer whispering occasional comments in his ear. This isn't what we discussed, Daniel finally said, looking up with accusation in his eyes. You're still claiming primary ownership of the cabin. With guaranteed usage rights for you, Catherine pointed out, provided you maintain your other obligations under the agreement. It's my cabin too, Daniel insisted. I found the property. I oversaw the renovations. My parents contributed to the down payment. And it would remain yours to use, I said calmly. But primary ownership would transfer to me as it would have automatically in 7 days under the abandonment clause. Daniel threw the document down, frustration evident. This is extortion. You're using my oversight against me. No, Daniel, I'm acknowledging reality. You chose to leave our marriage. That choice has consequences. Legal, financial, and emotional ones. This agreement actually preserves more of your rights than you would have had if we simply let the abandonment clause take effect. Martin placed a restraining hand on Daniel's arm, murmuring something I couldn't hear. Daniel shook his head sharply, then looked directly at me. What happened to you, Jen? This calculating, cold approach. This isn't the woman I married. The question hung in the air, its accusatory tone igniting something fierce inside me. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze steadily. What happened to me? Cancer happened. My husband abandoning me happened. Realizing I might die while you build a new life with Megan happened. And you know what else happened? I discovered my own strength. I realized I don't have to accept crumbs of consideration from someone who promised me a lifetime of loyalty. Daniel looked away first, his expression unreadable. After a brief, tense discussion with Martin, he reluctantly signed the agreement. This isn't the end of this conversation, he warned as he stood to leave. Once you're thinking more clearly. I've never thought more clearly in my life, I interrupted. That's what scares you. After they left, Catherine squeezed my shoulder. That was well handled. He signed because he knew he had no better options, but he needed to believe this. Was somehow your emotional reaction, rather than your reasoned choice. It's both, I admitted. I'm angry, hurt, and terrified about my future. But I'm also making the best decisions I can with the information and options available to me. Catherine smiled. That's what real strength looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but clear-eyed action despite it. I left her office with a signed separation agreement and a complicated mix of feelings. There was relief at securing some stability for Nathan and myself, sadness at the formal acknowledgement of my marriage's end, and an unexpected sense of empowerment. The woman who had existed in Daniel's shadow for 15 years was stepping into her own light. Dimmed by illness and uncertainty perhaps, but unmistakably her own. The signed separation agreement should have brought a sense of closure, but life rarely follows neat narrative arcs. Instead, the document that formalized the end of my marriage became just one more milestone in a journey with no clear destination. The cancer continued its quiet invasion, indifferent to legal proceedings and emotional upheaval. Dr. Chen's more aggressive treatment protocol left me weaker than before, my body a battleground of competing poisons, the disease versus the cure, with me caught in the crossfire. Olivia found me on the bathroom floor one morning, too depleted to stand after a night of relentless nausea. Without a word, she helped me back to bed, changed the sweat-soaked sheets, and called Dr. Chen's office. Hours later, I was admitted to Memorial Hospital for IV hydration and anti-nausea medication. We need to adjust your support system, Dr. Chen said, reviewing my chart with a frown. You shouldn't be alone during this phase of treatment. I'm not alone, I protested, weakly. Olivia checks on me daily. The school's meal train is still running. Nathan's friend's mom drives carpool on my bad days. That's not sustainable, Jennifer. You need consistent in-home support. Have you considered a home health aide? Your insurance should cover it, given your circumstances. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. A home health aide meant acknowledging a level of dependence I wasn't ready to accept. It meant strangers in my space, witnessing my decline, reporting my weaknesses. It meant Nathan seeing his mother cared for like an invalid. I'll think about it, I said, a non-answer that fooled neither of us. Dr. Chen's expression softened, with understanding. This isn't about your capability, Jennifer. It's about conserving your energy for what matters most, fighting the cancer and being present for Nathan. Everything else can be delegated. Later that evening, as I lay in the hospital bed watching twilight settle over Lakeside through the window, my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. Just heard from Olivia that you're in the hospital. Why didn't you call me? Nathan shouldn't be staying with neighbors when I'm available. The message caught me off guard. In the weeks since Daniel's departure, he'd maintained a studiously cordial distance, limiting our communications to logistics, about Nathan's schedule and the occasional inquiry about my health. The kind one might make about a distant relative, concerned but detached. Nathan's with Olivia, not neighbors, I replied. It's just overnight for hydration. I'll be home tomorrow. That's not the point. I'm his father. I should be the first call when you need backup. I stared at the message, incredulous at his sudden claim to parental priority. You chose to live 30 minutes away with Megan. Olivia lives 5 minutes away and can get Nathan to school. It was a practical decision during an emergency. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. This isn't working, Jen. The separation agreement looks good on paper, but the reality is falling apart. We need a better system for Nathan's care when you're not well. There was a certain irony in Daniel's concern for systematic childcare emerging only after his departure created the need for it. Before he left, we'd been a team. He'd step in. When I was too sick, I'd handle everything when he worked late. Now he wanted to formalize what had once been the natural rhythm of family life. We can discuss it when I'm discharged, I texted back, too exhausted for a more substantive response. True to her word, Olivia brought Nathan to visit me that evening, his small face solemn as he took in the hospital room, the IV stand, the monitoring equipment, the institutional sterility. "Does it hurt?" he asked, eyeing the needle in my arm. "Not really," I assured him. "It's just putting water and medicine directly into my body to help me feel better faster." He nodded, processing this information with the careful deliberation 10-year-olds apply to everything. "Dad says you should have called him. He's mad." Of course Daniel had expressed his frustration to Nathan. Of course he'd framed the situation as my failing rather than a consequence of his choices. I swallowed my irritation, unwilling to drag Nathan deeper into our conflict. Sometimes adults have different ideas about the best way to handle problems, I said carefully. It doesn't mean anyone is wrong. Dad would have helped if we'd called him, but Olivia was closer and could respond faster. Nathan seemed satisfied with this explanation, moving on to show me his science project photos on Olivia's phone. I listened attentively, marveling at his resilience in the face of such disruption. Children adapt, I reminded myself. They find normalcy in the most abnormal circumstances. The following day, Daniel arrived at the hospital just as Dr. Chen was completing my discharge paperwork. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his presence filling the small room with unspoken tension. "You look terrible," he said, then immediately grimaced at his own bluntness. "I mean, I didn't realize the new treatment was hitting you this hard." "That's why they call it aggressive therapy," I replied, gathering my few belongings. "The worse I feel, the better it's working." Supposedly. Dr. Chen glanced between us, her professional demeanor masking whatever she might think about this uncomfortable reunion. "Jennifer will need significant support at home for the next few weeks. The side effects tend to peak during this phase of treatment." Daniel straightened, stepping further into the room. "I can take time off work, stay at the house with Nathan while Jen recovers." The offer hung in the air like an unexploded device. Dr. Chen looked to me for a response, clearly recognizing the complexity beneath the surface. "That's not necessary," I said quietly. "I'm arranging for home health support." Daniel's expression hardened. "Strangers in the house instead of family? That's your solution?" "You stopped being household family when you moved in with Megan," I reminded him, careful to keep my tone neutral in Dr. Chen's presence. "But I appreciate the offer. Maybe you could take Nathan for extra days while I adjust to this treatment phase." It was a reasonable compromise, but Daniel's face suggested he saw it as a rejection. Before he could respond, Dr. Chen intervened, smoothly. "I need to discuss some medication adjustments with Jennifer before discharge. Perhaps you could check with the nurses about wheelchair assistance to the exit." Her polite dismissal left no room for argument. After Daniel stepped out, she turned to me with compassionate directness. "Family dynamics can complicate recovery. If your ex-husband's involvement creates stress, we need to factor that into your care plan." "He's not technically my ex yet," I said, the distinction suddenly important. "Just separated." The terminology matters less than the impact. On your well-being. Stress compromises immune function, which compromises treatment efficacy. She handed me a prescription. This is for a mild anti-anxiety medication. Use it when needed, especially before potentially difficult interactions. I pocketed the prescription, wondering when my emotional responses had become clinical concerns to be medicated away. I'm not anxious. I'm angry. There's a difference. There is, Dr. Chen agreed, but both consume energy you can't spare right now. The drive home with Daniel was an exercise in strained civility. He kept the conversation focused on practical matters: Nathan's upcoming soccer tournament, the yard maintenance that needed attention, the leaking gutter he'd noticed during his last visit. I can come by this weekend to fix it, he offered, as we pulled into the driveway of what had once been our shared home. Check on any other maintenance issues while I'm there. I recognized the strategy, positioning himself as the practical problem solver, the reliable handyman, the father who took care of things. It was a role he'd always played comfortably, one that allowed him to feel useful without demanding emotional engagement. Thank you. But Peter from next door already looked at it, I said, gathering my hospital bag. He's replacing the section this Saturday. Daniel's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Peter? Since when does Peter handle our home repairs? Since you moved out and he noticed the water damage forming on the exterior wall, I replied. Too tired to soften the truth. He offered to help. I accepted. I'm still responsible for this house, Jen. The separation agreement established financial responsibilities, not who climbs ladders to replace gutters. I opened the car door, eager to end the conversation. Besides, aren't you taking Megan to Denver this weekend? Nathan mentioned it during his last overnight with you. Daniel had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was tentative. I can reschedule. Don't bother. Peter's already bought the materials. I stepped out of the car, then paused. But thank you for the ride home. Inside, I found Olivia had been busy. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, a pot of soup simmering on the stove, clean sheets on my bed. The small touches of care brought unexpected tears to my eyes. You're back, she exclaimed, emerging from the laundry room. I wasn't expecting you for another hour. How was the drive with Daniel? Predictably awkward, I admitted, sinking into a kitchen chair. He's suddenly very concerned about house maintenance and childcare systems. Olivia snorted. Amazing how divorce clarifies men's understanding of domestic labor. She poured me a cup of tea. Thomas called while you were en route. He wants to stop by this evening to discuss some insurance updates. I told him 7:30 would work if you're up for it. Insurance updates? That sounds ominous. He said it wasn't urgent, just some paperwork that needs attention before your next treatment cycle. She studied my face. You look exhausted. Why? Don't you rest before Nathan gets home from school? I'll wake you when Thomas arrives. I nodded gratefully, the simple act of climbing the stairs to my bedroom requiring more energy than it should. Sleep came instantly, dreamless and deep, my body surrendering to the fatigue that had become my constant companion. When I awoke, the quality of light had changed. Golden evening sun slanting through the window blinds, casting long shadows across the bedroom floor. For a moment, I experienced the disorientation that had become familiar since my diagnosis, a brief confusion about time, place, and circumstance before reality reassembled itself. Voices drifted up from downstairs. Olivia's bright tone, Nathan's, higher pitch, and a deeper masculine rumble that I recognized as Thomas's. I checked the clock. 7:45. I'd slept longer than intended. After splashing water on my face and changing into fresh clothes, I made my way downstairs to find them gathered around the kitchen table. Nathan was showing Thomas his science project, something involving plant growth under different light conditions, while Olivia prepared a plate of food. There she is, Thomas said warmly as I entered. Feeling more rested? Much, I replied. accepting the plate Olivia handed me. Sorry to keep you waiting. No apologies necessary. Nathan's been explaining photosynthesis to me in impressive detail. He winked at my son, who beamed with pride. Mom, Thomas says I should be a scientist when I grow up, Nathan announced. He says I ask excellent questions. He's absolutely right, I agreed, ruffling Nathan's hair. You're the most curious person I know. Olivia glanced at her watch. Nathan, it's nearly time for your video call with Dad. Why don't you get set up in the study while your mom talks with Thomas? After Nathan left, Thomas pulled a folder from his briefcase. I wanted to review some updates to your insurance coverage before your next treatment cycle begins. The hospital billing department flagged a potential issue that I've resolved, but it requires your signature. He explained the technical details, something about in-network providers and pre-authorization requirements, as I signed the necessary forms. But I sensed there was more to his visit than paperwork. Is that all? I asked when the insurance matters were settled. You could have emailed these documents. Thomas exchanged a glance with Olivia before responding. There's something else we wanted to discuss, but it's delicate. It concerns Daniel. My stomach tightened. What's he done now? He came to my office yesterday, asking about modifying the life insurance policy. Currently, you're the primary beneficiary of his $5 million policy, with Nathan as the secondary beneficiary. Let me guess, he wants to make Megan a beneficiary. Thomas shook his head. Not exactly. He wants to remove you entirely and make Nathan the sole beneficiary, with Megan as the trustee who would manage the funds until Nathan turns 25. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Daniel wanted to erase me as his beneficiary. Understandable given our separation. But his choice of Megan as trustee for Nathan's inheritance felt like a deliberate erasure of my role as mother. Can he do that? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Legally, yes. The policy is in his name, and he has the right to change beneficiaries. Thomas hesitated. However, there's a provision in your separation agreement that might be relevant. Section 12B requires both parties to maintain existing life insurance with current beneficiary designations for a minimum of 1 year following separation. I vaguely remembered Catherine pointing out that clause, explaining it was standard practice to prevent hasty financial decisions during the emotional upheaval of separation. So he can't make this change for another 10 months, I concluded. Not without violating the agreement, Thomas confirmed. I reminded him of this, which he didn't receive well. Olivia made a derisive sound. That's putting it mildly. Thomas said he threw a fit in the office, accusing you both of conspiring against him. He's under stress, Thomas added diplomatically. The separation, your illness, the new relationship. It's a lot of change at once. People don't always think clearly during such transitions. I pushed my barely touched plate away, appetite gone. Did you tell him you were informing me about this? Of course. I'm bound by professional ethics to be transparent with all parties. He knows I'm here. That explained Daniel's tense behavior in the car earlier. He'd known this conversation was coming. He'd been trying to reassert his position as family caretaker while simultaneously working to diminish my financial security. What should I do? I asked, looking between them. Legally? Nothing at this point, Thomas advised. The separation agreement protects your beneficiary status for now, but I wanted you to be aware of his intentions. Knowledge is power in these situations. After Thomas left, Olivia stayed to help with dishes while Nathan finished his call with Daniel. We worked in companionable silence until she spoke, her voice uncharacteristically hesitant. There's something else you should know. About Daniel. And Megan. I braced myself. They're engaged? She's pregnant? They're moving to Portugal? Nothing that dramatic, but they're house hunting. In Nathan's school district. I set down the dish I was drying, absorbing this news. How do you know? Thomas mentioned it. Apparently, Daniel applied for pre-approval on a mortgage loan through his financial advisor, who happens to play golf with Thomas. Small towns. Their greatest comfort and greatest curse was how information traveled through invisible networks of connection. Well, that makes sense, I said finally. The custody arrangement would be easier if Nathan could walk between houses. Probably better for him, too. Olivia studied me skeptically. That's very rational of you. What alternative do I have? Rage against Daniel for wanting to live near his son? That hardly seems productive. It's okay to have feelings. About it, Jen. About all of it. You don't have to be the understanding ex-wife who makes everything easier for everyone else. Her words penetrated the careful shell of composure I'd constructed. If I start feeling everything, I might never stop, I admitted quietly. And I can't afford to fall apart right now. Nathan needs stability. I need to focus on treatment. Everything else has to wait. Olivia wrapped her arms around me, a gesture so unexpected and gentle that I nearly broke down then and there. You're the strongest person I know, she whispered. But even the strongest people need safe places to be vulnerable. That night, after Nathan was asleep, I sat on the porch swing with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The medication Dr. Chen had prescribed remained untouched in my purse. I didn't want chemical, calm. I wanted to feel everything: the anger, the fear, the grief, the moments of unexpected peace. Because feeling it meant I was still alive, still fighting. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Thomas told me he spoke with you. I want to explain. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. Explain what? Why you want Megan to control Nathan's inheritance instead of his mother? His response came quickly. It's not like that. I was trying to create a backup plan in case. The unfinished sentence hung there, its implication clear. In case I died. Daniel was planning for a world where I no longer existed, where Megan stepped into my role as Nathan's mother. I set the phone down without responding, unable to formulate words that wouldn't escalate the situation. The crickets chirped in the darkness, the porch swing creaked with my movement, and somewhere down the street a dog barked. Normal sounds of a normal night in a world that continued spinning despite the dissolution of what I'd once considered permanent. The following morning brought a new complication. Patricia called, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Jennifer, I've just had a very disturbing conversation with Nathan. He says you're hiring strangers to live in the house? Some sort of medical people? I closed my eyes, counting to 5 before responding. Good morning, Patricia. I'm considering a home health aide to help during my treatment. It's something my oncologist recommended. Without consulting us? Without considering how this will affect Nathan, having strangers in his home during such a vulnerable time? The presumptive us grated on my nerves. Since when did my medical decisions require family committee approval? Nathan seems fine with the idea, I said calmly. We discussed it yesterday. The aide would help with meals and household management when I'm not feeling well, which means more consistent routines for Nathan, not less. That's what family is for, Patricia insisted. Richard and I can come stay, or Nathan can come live with us temporarily while you recover. There's no need for hired help. The offer might have seemed generous if not for its transparent subtext. Patricia and Richard wanted Nathan in their home, away from the visible evidence of my illness, away from the disruption of cancer treatment, away from me. I appreciate the offer, I said, forcing warmth into my voice. But Nathan needs to stay in his own home, in his routine, with his friends nearby. The home health aide is the least disruptive option for him. Is this another control issue, Jennifer, like the cabin situation? Because if you're using your illness to manipulate access to Nathan, stop. My voice cut through her escalating accusations. I understand you're concerned about Nathan. So am I. but let me be absolutely clear. My medical decisions are not up for debate or approval. Not by you, not by Daniel, not by anyone except me and my doctors. Well, Patricia sounded affronted. I see how it is. When we offer help, we're interfering. When we step back, we're abandoning you. There's no winning with you anymore, Jennifer. The conversation ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving me with a familiar hollow feeling in my chest. When had Daniel's parents become adversaries rather than family? How had cancer and separation transformed relationships that had once seemed solid and caring? Later that day, as I sorted through medical bills at the kitchen table, Dr. Chen's office called with my latest test results. The nurse's voice was professionally neutral, but I'd become attuned to the subtle cues that signaled bad news. Doctor, Chen would like you to come in tomorrow to discuss your response to treatment. Can you be here at 11 Dao? That's not our regular appointment day, I noted, a flutter of anxiety rising in my chest. Is something wrong with my blood work? Doctor, Chen prefers to discuss test results in person, the nurse replied, a non-answer that confirmed my suspicions. She's had a cancellation tomorrow morning. Otherwise, it would be next week. I'll be there, I promised, already mentally rearranging my schedule. Nathan had soccer practice after school, which meant asking for another favor from another friend. After hanging up, I sat motionless at the table, staring at the stack of medical bills without really seeing them. The cancer was evolving, adapting, finding pathways around the treatment that was supposed to eradicate it. I knew this with a certainty that transcended medical knowledge, a bone-deep intuition born from living inside a body at war with itself. The front door opened, startling me from my thoughts. Nathan burst in, followed by Peter from next door, both carrying grocery bags. Mom! Mr. Parker took me to the store after school, Nathan announced, setting his bag on the counter. We got ingredients for pizza night. Peter smiled apologetically. Hope that's okay. Nathan mentioned you were feeling tired today, and Friday night pizza seemed like a tradition worth preserving. The simple kindness nearly undid me. Peter and his wife Lisa had stepped up in countless ways since my diagnosis, driving Nathan to activities, including him in family outings, offering normalcy when everything else was in flux. It's perfect, I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. Thank you. As Nathan excitedly unpacked pepperoni and cheese, Peter lowered his voice. Lisa sent a casserole too. It's in the car, and she said to remind you that Nathan is welcome to sleep over tomorrow if you need quiet after your appointment. My appointment? I echoed, surprised. Olivia mentioned it when she picked up Nathan from school. She thought you might need coverage. He shrugged, embarrassed by his own thoughtfulness. We're here if you need anything. You know that, right? The weight of gratitude was almost physical, a pressure in my chest that made it hard to breathe. These neighbors who had no obligation beyond proximity had become more reliable than family with blood ties. I know, I whispered, and it means more than I can say. As Peter left and Nathan began setting out pizza toppings, my phone buzzed with another text from Daniel. We need to talk about what Thomas told you. It's not what you think. Can I stop by tomorrow? I glanced at Nathan, happily arranging pepperoni in careful concentric circles on rolled-out pizza dough, humming to himself. Tomorrow I would learn whether the treatment was working. Tomorrow, I would face whatever new reality Dr. Chen's test results revealed. Tomorrow would bring enough challenges without adding Daniel's justifications to the mix. Not tomorrow, I texted back. I have a doctor's appointment at 11 and need to rest afterward. His response was immediate. Important appointment? Do you need someone to go with you? The offer surprised me. Since moving out, Daniel had shown little interest in the medical aspects of my treatment, seemingly content to maintain emotional distance from the messy reality of cancer. Olivia's coming with me? I replied, a slight exaggeration. I hadn't actually asked her yet, but I knew she would rearrange her schedule if needed. Okay, let me know what the doctor says. I set the phone down, uncertain how to interpret this flicker of concern. Was it genuine worry about my health? Practical interest in a co-parent's medical status? Or something more complicated? The guilt-driven attention of a man who had abandoned his sick wife, but didn't want to see himself as the kind of person who would do such a thing. Nathan looked up from his pizza creation. Dad texted you, right? I can tell from your face. How? I asked, startled by his perception. He shrugged. You get a little line between your eyebrows, like you're trying to solve a hard math problem. I laughed, the tension breaking. You're too observant for your own good. Yes, Dad texted. He wanted to know about my doctor's appointment tomorrow. Can I come with you? I don't have to go to school. Mrs. Rodriguez said I need mental health days too sometimes. Mrs. Rodriguez, Olivia. Always advocating for Nathan's emotional well-being while respecting my authority as his mother. I made a mental note to thank her for the 1,000th time. Not this time, buddy. It's just a quick check-in, and then I'll probably need to rest. But how about pizza and a movie tonight? Your choice. He considered this compromise, then nodded. Can we watch something scary? Define scary, I countered, knowing his definition ranged from mild animated adventures to horror films well beyond his age range. Like Jurassic Park scary, with dinosaurs but not too much blood? I pretended to consider this carefully. Dinosaurs are acceptable, but you have to promise not to hide under the coffee table like last time. That was once, Mom, he protested, laughing. We spent the evening on the couch, pizza balanced on our laps, watching velociraptors chase, children through an industrial kitchen. Nathan tucked himself against my side, warm and solid, providing an anchor in the uncertain waters of my life. When he jumped at scary scenes, I felt needed. When he laughed at clever dialogue, I remembered joy. When he finally fell asleep against my shoulder, I experienced a moment of perfect peace, the kind that exists only in the spaces between heartbeats, fleeting but profound. Tomorrow would bring test results and difficult conversations. Tomorrow might change everything again. But tonight, watching my son sleep in the blue light of the television, I allowed myself to believe that love, this fierce, protective love, that transcended physical weakness, might be enough to carry us both through whatever came next. The morning of my appointment with Dr. Chen dawned with a crystalline clarity that seemed almost cruel. Sunlight streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, an ordinary miracle I might once have overlooked. I lay still for a moment, cataloging sensations, the weight of the comforter, the distant chirp of birds, the hollow ache in my bones that never quite subsided these days. Whatever news awaited me at the hospital, this moment, simply being alive, to witness another sunrise, felt like a small victory. Olivia arrived precisely when she promised, a travel mug of ginger tea in hand. She'd become adept at anticipating my needs, learning which scents triggered nausea and which remedies provided relief. The tea was a silent acknowledgement of my anxiety, a practical comfort when words would have fallen short. Ready? She asked, her tone deliberately light as I settled into the passenger seat of her car. As I'll ever be, I replied, attempting a smile that probably looked more like a grimace. We drove in companionable silence, the familiar route to Memorial Hospital unfolding outside the window. The elementary school where I'd once taught summer programs, the park where Nathan had learned to ride a bike, the coffee shop where Daniel and I had spent Sunday mornings before our son was born. Lakeside was too small for amnesia. Memory lurked around every corner. Dr. Chen was waiting in her office rather than an examination room. My first clue that this conversation would be substantive rather than procedural. The second clue was the presence of Dr. Abrams, the radiation oncologist whose name had been mentioned as a potential addition to my treatment team, if necessary. Jennifer? Dr. Chen greeted me, her professional demeanor softened by genuine warmth. Thank you for coming in. I see you've brought support. That's excellent. Olivia squeezed my hand as we sat down, her presence steadying me for whatever came next. Let's get right to it, Dr. Chen continued, opening my file. Your latest scans and blood work indicate that the tumor isn't responding to the current chemotherapy protocol as we'd hoped. There's been minimal reduction in size, and we're seeing some concerning cell activity in nearby lymph nodes. Despite preparing myself for bad news, the words hit like a physical blow. What does that mean? Exactly? Dr. Abrams leaned forward, his speech measured and precise. It means we need to adjust our approach. Dr. Chen and I have reviewed your case extensively, and we believe the best course of action is to add radiation therapy to your treatment plan, targeting both the primary tumor site and the affected lymph nodes. Would I still continue chemotherapy? I asked, trying to process what this escalation meant. Yes, but with modifications, Dr. Chen explained. We'd adjust the drug combination and possibly the dosage schedule. The goal is to attack the cancer from multiple angles simultaneously. They continued outlining the new treatment protocol, daily radiation sessions for 6 weeks, combined with a revised chemotherapy regimen. The potential side effects sounded even more debilitating than what I'd already experienced. Increased fatigue, potential skin burns from radiation, heightened risk of infection due to further immune suppression. Each clinical detail hammered home a simple truth. The cancer was fighting back, adapting to survive. What are my odds with this new approach? I finally asked, the question that had been hovering unspoken in the room. The doctors exchanged a glance that lasted a fraction too long. Cancer treatment isn't about absolute certainties, Dr. Chen began carefully. It's about increasing probabilities of positive outcomes. I understand that, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I need some context for making decisions. Are we talking about a 70% chance of remission? 50%? 30%? Dr. Abrams took over, his tone frank but not unkind. Based on your specific cancer type, stage, and response pattern, the literature suggests a 40 to 45% chance of significant remission with this combined approach. That's not insignificant, Jennifer. Not insignificant, but not reassuring either. A flip of the coin, slightly weighted toward the negative outcome. And without this new treatment, I pressed, the probability would decrease substantially, he replied. Perhaps to 20% or lower. Beside me, Olivia drew a sharp breath. I reached for her hand, an automatic gesture of comfort, even as I processed my own reaction to these numbers. When would we start? I asked, the question itself an answer. Ideally, next week, Dr. Chen said. We'd conduct some preliminary tests first, heart function, lung capacity, baseline blood panels. Then begin radiation on Monday, with the modified chemotherapy the following Thursday. I nodded, mentally reorganizing the calendar in my head. Nathan's soccer tournament, the school open house, the home repairs that needed attention. Life. Continuing to demand attention even as death whispered its possibility. I'll need to make some arrangements for Nathan, I said, more to myself than to them, and work out logistics for daily hospital visits. Dr. Chen closed my file, her expression softening. Jennifer, this next phase will be challenging. You'll need significant support, practical help with transportation, household management, childcare. Is there family who can step in? Or should we discuss home health services? The question hung awkwardly between us. Both doctors knew about Daniel's departure, though neither had directly acknowledged it in our conversations. I have friends, I said simply, and I'm looking into home health options. Olivia spoke, up for the first time since we'd entered the office. She has a village. We've got schedules and backup plans, transportation, meals, childcare. It's all being coordinated. Dr. Chen smiled, clearly relieved. That's excellent. Support systems. matter as much as medical interventions and cancer treatment outcomes. As we left the office with a folder of information sheets and appointment cards, Olivia maintained a careful silence, respecting my need to process before discussing. It wasn't until we were back in her car, hospital receding in the rearview mirror, that she spoke. "What do you need right now? Food? Quiet? Distraction?" I considered the question seriously. What did I need in this moment when my future had just become even more uncertain? "Nathan," I said finally, "I need to see my son." Olivia checked the time. "He should be at soccer practice for another hour. We could pick him up early?" I shook my head. "No, let him finish. But could we watch from the sidelines? I just want to see him doing normal kid things." 20 minutes later, we sat on bleachers at the community field, watching a dozen 10-year-olds chase a soccer ball with varying degrees of coordination. Nathan hadn't noticed us yet, his attention focused entirely on the game. His face flushed with exertion, hair damp with sweat, expression intense with concentration, so vibrantly alive it made my chest ache. "He looks more like you every day," Olivia observed, following my gaze. "That determined chin, the way he narrows his eyes when he's focusing." "Poor kid," I said with a sad smile. "Stuck with my stubborn streak and Daniel's competitiveness." "Those aren't bad qualities to inherit," she replied. "Determination and drive will serve him well." I watched as Nathan intercepted a pass, dribbling down the field with surprising skill before passing to a teammate. "I need to make sure he remembers me," I said quietly, the words escaping before I could filter them. "If this doesn't work..." Olivia turned to face me fully, her expression fierce. "Jennifer Hayes, don't you dare talk like that. This treatment is going to work. And even in the absolute worst case, Nathan could never forget you. You're woven into the fiber of who he is." "Kids forget," I insisted, tears threatening. "I was 8 when my grandmother died. I thought I'd remember her forever, but now I can only recall fragments. The smell of her perfume, the sound of her laugh. Not her face, not her voice, not the whole person." "That's why we have photos and videos and stories," Olivia said practically. "But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The doctors gave you options, not a deadline." I nodded, forcing back the fear that threatened to overwhelm me. "You're right. One day at a time, right?" "1 hour at a time if necessary," she agreed. "And right now, this hour is about watching your son play soccer and remembering that life continues." Nathan spotted us then, his face lighting up with surprise and delight. He waved enthusiastically, nearly missing a pass in his distraction. The simple joy of his recognition centered me in the present moment, pulling me back from the edge of despair. After practice, as we drove home with Nathan chattering excitedly about an upcoming game, my phone rang with Daniel's number displayed on the screen. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but Nathan noticed. "It's Dad," he said, leaning forward from the back seat. "Are you going to tell him about your doctor appointment?" Reluctantly, I answered, putting the call on speaker for Nathan's benefit. "Hello, Daniel." "Jen, how did it go today? What did the doctor say?" His voice held genuine concern, catching me off guard. I glanced at Nathan in the rearview mirror, choosing my words carefully. "There are some changes to the treatment plan. We can discuss details later." "Changes? Is that good or bad?" Daniel pressed. "It's an adjustment. I'm still processing." Nathan spoke up from the back seat. "Hi, Dad. Mom came to watch my soccer practice. Coach says I might get to play striker in the next game." Daniel's tone immediately brightened. "That's great, buddy. You've been working on your footwork, haven't you? It must be paying off." The conversation shifted to safer territory. Soccer strategies, weekend plans, a science project due next week. I half listened, grateful for Nathan's unwitting intervention. When the call ended, Olivia gave me a knowing look. "You're going?" "To have to tell him eventually," she said quietly, about the new treatment protocol. I know, I sighed. Just not today. But not today became increasingly difficult to maintain. By the time we arrived home, Daniel had texted 3 times asking for details about my appointment. His persistence was unusual. Since leaving, he'd maintained a careful distance from the medical aspects of my life, treating my cancer almost as if it were a separate entity from me, something he could acknowledge without engaging too deeply. After Nathan was settled with homework, I finally called Daniel back, bracing myself for the conversation. What did the doctor say? He asked without preamble. Is the treatment working? I sank onto the porch swing, suddenly exhausted. Not as well as they'd hoped. They're adding radiation therapy and changing the chemo drugs. Silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken implications. What does that mean exactly? He finally asked, his voice uncharacteristically tentative. It means the cancer is more aggressive than they initially thought. They're escalating treatment accordingly. But it's still treatable, right? The careful avoidance of direct questions about mortality was so typically Daniel, always skirting the edges of difficult conversations, approaching emotional landmines with clinical detachment. They're giving me treatment options, not guarantees, I said simply. The new protocol starts next week. Daily radiation for 6 weeks plus modified chemo. Daily, as in every single day? Monday through Friday. 30 treatments total. Another pause. How will that work with Nathan and your energy levels? A reasonable question, but it irritated me nonetheless. Where was this practical concern when he'd packed his bags? Where was this consideration for logistics when he'd chosen to prioritize his own comfort over our family's stability? I'm figuring it out, I said shortly. Olivia's coordinating a schedule with other friends, and I'm interviewing home health aides next week. I could help, he offered. Take some days driving you to treatment. Have Nathan stay with me more during the week. The offer seemed genuine, but I'd learned to be wary of Daniel's temporary enthusiasms. How long before the daily reality of cancer caregiving, the messes, the mood swings, the medical equipment, became too much for him again? Let's see how the first week goes, I said noncommittally. I appreciate the offer, but I need consistency. Right now. Nathan does too. I can be consistent, Daniel protested, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. Despite what you might think, I am reliable. I bit back a sarcastic response about the reliability of men who abandon their wives during cancer treatment. This isn't about rehashing the past, Daniel. It's about creating stable support systems moving forward. If you want to help, we can discuss specific days or tasks that would fit into the overall plan. Fine, he said, clearly frustrated by my lack of enthusiasm. Let me know what you decide. And Jen, I really am sorry about how things have gone. I never wanted to make this harder for you. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard, momentarily disarming my defenses. I know, I said quietly, but intentions and impact don't always align. After hanging up, I sat on the porch long, after the sun had set, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. Daniel's offer of help stirred complicated emotions. There was a part of me, a small, traitorous part, that still wished for reconciliation, for our family to be whole again. But that fantasy belonged to a different version of me, the pre-cancer Jennifer who believed in second chances and happy endings. The woman I was becoming, shaped by illness, betrayal, and newfound resilience, knew better than to stake her survival on unreliable foundations. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. Medical paperwork, insurance authorizations, coordination meetings with various specialists. I interviewed 3 potential home health aides, eventually selecting Maria, a calm, efficient woman in her 50s whose experience with cancer patients was evident in her matter-of-fact approach to potential challenges. The most important thing is maintaining normalcy for your son, she explained during our final interview. Children need routine and security, especially when a parent is ill. My job is to support that stability by handling the practical matters that might otherwise disrupt your household. Her understanding of the emotional dimensions of illness, not just the physical aspects, sealed my decision. Maria would start the following Monday, coinciding with my first radiation treatment. Telling Nathan about the intensified treatment plan proved more difficult than I'd anticipated. We sat at the kitchen table Saturday morning, pancakes growing cold between us as I carefully explained what would happen in the coming weeks. "So you'll be going to the hospital every day?" he asked, forehead creased with worry. "Even more than before?" "Yes, but the actual treatments are shorter than chemotherapy. And Maria will be here to help with meals and driving and other things that might be hard for me." He poked at his pancakes, avoiding my gaze. "Is this because the other medicine didn't work? Are you getting sicker?" The directness of children can be devastating. I reached for his hand, choosing honesty over false reassurance. "The first treatment worked a little bit, but not enough. The doctors think this new plan will work better." "But what if it doesn't?" His voice was small, frightened. "Then we'll try something else," I said firmly. "The important thing is that I'm not giving up. Not even close." He seemed to consider this, then asked the question I'd been dreading. "Does Dad know? About the new treatments?" "Yes, I told him yesterday." "Is he going to help? Or is it just going to be Maria and Olivia and your other friends?" The complicated reality of co-parenting with someone who was simultaneously essential to our lives and increasingly peripheral to our daily existence had never felt more challenging. I chose my words carefully. "Dad wants to help, and we're figuring out how he can do that in a way that works for everyone. He might drive me to some appointments, or have you stay with him more often when I'm extra tired." Nathan nodded, processing this information. "Maybe he could move back home to help? Just until you're better?" The innocent suggestion pierced my heart. "That's not going to happen, sweetie. Dad has his own place now, with Megan. But that doesn't mean he can't still be part of our support team." "I don't like Megan," Nathan said suddenly, his expression darkening. "She tries too hard to be nice to me, like she's pretending. And she always talks about Dad like he's so perfect. She doesn't even know him." I suppressed a smile at this astute observation from my 10-year-old. People show different sides of themselves in different relationships. The Dad you know is different from the Daniel that Megan knows. "The real Dad wouldn't leave when you're sick," Nathan said with absolute certainty. "So she doesn't know the real him." The simplicity of his moral calculus left me momentarily speechless. To Nathan, the equation was straightforward. Good people don't abandon family during crisis. His father had done exactly that, creating a cognitive dissonance his young mind was still struggling to reconcile. "People are complicated, Nathan. They can do things that seem wrong or hurtful even when they're not bad people. Dad's leaving wasn't about you, and it wasn't really about me either. It was about his own feelings and fears. Adults are supposed to be brave," Nathan insisted. "That's what you always say." "Being brave doesn't mean never being afraid," I replied. "It means doing what's necessary even when you are afraid." Dad and I have different ways of handling our fears right now. This explanation seemed to satisfy him temporarily, though I knew the conversation was far from over. Nathan's relationship with his father would continue evolving as he processed the events of the past months through his developing moral framework. Sunday brought unexpected developments. Daniel arrived unannounced in the afternoon, a folder of papers in hand and an expression of determination on his face. "I've been researching your new treatment protocol," he announced without preamble when I opened the door. "There are some complementary therapies we should consider adding to the regimen." The "we" caught me off guard, as if we were still a unit making joint decisions about my health. Hello to you too, Daniel. Nathan's at the Parkers for a play date. I know. I called Peter to check before coming over. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, heading straight for the kitchen table where he spread out his papers. Look at these studies on nutrition during radiation therapy. There are specific dietary approaches that can potentially enhance treatment efficacy while minimizing side effects. I stood in the doorway, watching as he arranged research printouts and highlighted articles with the focused intensity I remembered from our early days together. Daniel had always approached problems this way, researching exhaustively, attacking challenges with meticulous planning and boundless energy. It had been one of the qualities I'd most admired about him. What brought this on? I asked, finally, joining him at the table. You haven't exactly been involved in my treatment decisions until now. He looked up, genuinely surprised by the question. Your prognosis changed. The situation is more serious now. It was always serious, Daniel. Cancer doesn't come in casual varieties. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know that. I wasn't handling it well before. I'm trying to do better now. I studied his face, searching for signs of the man I'd married, the partner who had once been my steadfast support through life's challenges. There were glimpses of him there, beneath the strain of recent months. Why? I asked simply. Why what? Why try now? What changed? Daniel sat back, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache with nostalgia. When you said they were escalating treatment, something clicked. I realized I've been acting like your cancer was a temporary situation we just needed to get through. But it's not temporary, is it? It's our new reality, and I need to figure out how to be part of it constructively. The honesty of his answer surprised me. I'd expected platitudes about family responsibility or guilty justifications for past behavior. Instead, he offered something that felt like genuine self-reflection. Our new reality, I repeated. That's an interesting choice of words, given that you've created a separate life with Megan. Complicated doesn't mean disconnected, he said quietly. I'm still Nathan's father, and you and I still have a relationship, even if it's changed. I gestured to the papers spread between us. So this is... what? Your way of maintaining connection? Research as relationship? It's my way of helping in a way I actually can, he admitted. I wasn't strong enough to be what you needed emotionally. I'm still not, if I'm being honest. But practical support? Research? Logistics? That I can do. The candid acknowledgement of his limitations was disarming. For months, I'd cast Daniel as the villain in our story, the husband who abandoned his sick wife in her hour of need. His admission of weakness didn't excuse his actions, but it complicated my narrative in ways that were both unsettling and oddly relieving. I appreciate the research, I said finally, and any practical help you can provide consistently. But I need to be clear about boundaries. This doesn't change our separation or the decisions we've made. I know, he said quickly. I'm not trying to. This isn't about reconciliation, Jen. It's about figuring out how to co-parent and coexist while you fight this disease. For Nathan's sake, if nothing else. For Nathan's sake. The phrase had become a shared mantra, the common ground, where our diverging lives still intersected. All right, I conceded. Show me what you've found. For the next hour, we reviewed his research, dietary modifications that might reduce radiation side effects, supplement recommendations to discuss with my oncology team, practical strategies for managing fatigue during intensive treatment. Some ideas were unrealistic given my already compromised energy levels, but others seemed potentially valuable. I could prepare some of these meals for you, Daniel offered, indicating a list of nutrient-dense recipes designed for cancer patients. Drop them off a couple times a week, already portioned for reheating. That would actually be helpful, I admitted. The home health aide is only here part-time, and cooking has become challenging. I remember, he said softly. During your first round of chemo, you couldn't even stand the smell of food being prepared. The fact that he remembered such details, had been paying attention even as he pulled away emotionally, felt significant in ways I couldn't quite articulate. One more thing, Daniel said, reaching into his briefcase. I've been talking with HR at work about my insurance coverage. Since we're legally separated but not divorced, you're still covered as my dependent. But I wanted to make sure there wouldn't be any issues with this new treatment protocol. He handed me a letter from his company's benefits administrator, confirming that my oncology treatment was fully covered regardless of network limitations, with an additional note about supplemental policies available for catastrophic illness. I've already enrolled in the supplemental coverage, Daniel explained. It provides additional funds for home care, transportation to medical appointments, and other expenses not covered by standard insurance. I stared at the documents, momentarily speechless. While I'd been focusing on the emotional betrayal of Daniel's departure, he'd apparently been quietly ensuring financial protection for my medical needs. Thank you, I said, the words inadequate for the relief this practical support provided. This is really helpful. Daniel nodded, seemingly uncomfortable with gratitude. It's the least I can do, literally the bare minimum considering. The self-deprecating honesty startled a genuine laugh from me, the first we'd shared in months. Well, at least you're aware. Something shifted between us in that moment. Not forgiveness exactly, but a easing of the brittle tension that had characterized our interactions since his departure. We weren't friends, we weren't partners, but perhaps we could be allies in the specific, limited context of my treatment and Nathan's well-being. As Daniel gathered his papers to leave, he hesitated at the door. I'd like to drive you to your first radiation appointment tomorrow, if that's okay. The offer hung between us, laden with symbolism beyond the practical gesture. Accepting meant allowing Daniel back into the medical aspect of my life, an intimacy I'd carefully guarded since our separation. Olivia was planning to take me, I hedged. I know. I called her already to discuss it. At my raised eyebrow, he added hastily, not to override your arrangements, just to see if it might work for me to take this first one. She said it was up to you. The fact that he'd coordinated with Olivia, rather than simply assuming his right to participate, touched something in me. The Daniel who had left wouldn't have considered the existing support system I'd built in his absence. All right, I agreed cautiously. But just the first appointment. We'll see how it goes from there. His relief was palpable. Thank you. I'll be here at 8:30. After he left, I sat in the quiet house, processing the unexpected turn of events. Daniel's renewed involvement complicated the narrative I'd constructed. The abandoned wife bravely facing cancer alone while her husband built a new life elsewhere. His presence, however limited, forced me to reconcile the hurt of his leaving with the reality of his continued connection to our lives. That evening, as I prepared Nathan for the week ahead, explaining Maria's role and the new schedule of hospital visits, he asked the question I'd been anticipating since Daniel's visit. Is Dad trying to come back home? I chose my words carefully, aware of the hope lurking beneath his casual tone. No, sweetheart. Dad is trying to be more helpful with my treatment, but he's still living with Megan. Nathan's face fell slightly, though he tried to hide his disappointment. But he's going to drive you to the hospital sometimes? Yes, starting tomorrow. He'll take me to my first radiation appointment. That's good, right? That he wants to help? The simple question demanded a nuanced answer. Was Daniel's renewed involvement good? It certainly made practical aspects of treatment more manageable. But emotionally, the jury was still out. It's good that he wants to support my treatment, I said carefully. It makes things easier logistically, but it doesn't change our living situation or the decisions Dad's made. Nathan nodded, processing this with the solemn thoughtfulness that sometimes made him seem older than his years. Mom, if your new medicine works and you get better, will things go back to normal? The innocent question broke my heart. What was normal now? The life we'd had before cancer? Before Daniel's departure? Those versions of normal had disappeared, impossible to recapture regardless of my prognosis. Things will be different than they are right now, I promised, the only honest answer I could offer. But we'll create a new normal that's good in its own way. That night, preparing for tomorrow's first radiation treatment, I stood before the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection with clinical detachment. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the Jennifer Hayes who had existed before diagnosis. Hollowed cheeks, dark circles beneath eyes that seemed too large for my face, skin that had taken on a grayish pallor beneath its surface. Cancer had transformed me physically, Daniel's departure had altered me emotionally, and tomorrow would begin yet another phase of metamorphosis. Who would I become through this next crucible? What version of myself would emerge if I survived? And what legacy would remain if I didn't? These questions followed me into uneasy dreams, where I searched endlessly for something misplaced, a self I could no longer locate, a future I couldn't quite envision, a peace that remained stubbornly out of reach. Morning arrived with a gentle insistence, threads of dawn light filtering through my bedroom curtains. Today marked the beginning of radiation, 30 treatments stretched across 6 weeks, each one a small battle in the larger war against the cells rebelling within my body. I rose slowly, navigating the familiar fatigue that had become my constant companion. Daniel arrived exactly at 8:30, neither early nor late. Punctuality had always been his signature. I watched through the window as he checked his reflection in the car mirror and straightened his collar before approaching the door. This attention to appearance, even for a hospital visit, was so quintessentially Daniel that it almost made me smile. "Morning," he greeted, his voice carefully neutral. "Ready to go?" I nodded, gathering my bag and the folder of paperwork Dr. Chen had provided. Nathan had already left for school, a deliberate scheduling choice to spare him the anxiety of watching. Me leave for another treatment. The drive to Memorial Hospital unfolded in companionable silence, neither of us quite knowing how to navigate this new dynamic. Not quite friends, no longer spouses, reluctant allies in the face of my illness. As we approached the radiation oncology department, Daniel finally spoke. "Would you like me to come in with you, or wait in the car?" The question hung between us, weighted with implications about boundaries and intimacy. 4 months ago, there would have been no question. Of course, my husband would accompany me into treatment. Now, his presence felt simultaneously comforting and intrusive. "You can come in for the intake process," I decided. "The actual radiation session is short, and they don't allow companions in the treatment room anyway." Daniel nodded, following me through the sliding doors into the department's waiting area. The space was designed to be soothing, soft lighting, nature photographs on the walls, comfortable seating arranged in small conversational groups rather than institutional rows. Still, nothing could fully disguise the underlying purpose of this place. The intake nurse, Linda, greeted me with professional warmth, her practiced smile including Daniel without question or judgment. "First time with radiation?" she asked, guiding us to a consultation room. "Yes," I confirmed. Dr. Chen and Dr. Abrams explained the process, but it's still a bit abstract. "That's completely normal," Linda assured me. "We'll walk you through every step today, and soon it will become routine. Most patients find radiation less immediately disruptive than chemotherapy, though the cumulative effects build over time." As she continued explaining the procedure, the careful positioning, the brief treatment time, the importance of hitting the exact same spot each day, I felt Daniel's attention shift. He was no longer just accompanying me. He was absorbing information, asking clarifying questions, jotting notes in the small notebook he'd brought. The researcher, the problem solver, the practical support system he'd always been before cancer and betrayal complicated our story. The most important thing to remember, Linda concluded, is consistency. We need to treat the exact same area every day, so the small tattoo marks we'll place today help us align the radiation precisely. Missing appointments or significant weight changes can impact treatment efficacy. Daniel looked up sharply. What happens if she can't make an appointment? If she's too sick or there's a weather emergency? We build in a small buffer for unavoidable disruptions, Linda explained. But we try to minimize those as much as possible. That's why having reliable transportation and support is so important during radiation. His eyes met mine briefly, a silent communication passing between us. Reliable support, the very thing he'd failed to provide when he walked out, the role he was now attempting to reclaim in this limited context. After completing the paperwork, Linda led me toward the treatment room, explaining that Daniel would need to remain in the waiting area. The first session takes longer because we need to create your positioning mold and place the alignment tattoos. Subsequent treatments will be much quicker. As I prepared to follow her through the secured doorway, Daniel touched my arm lightly. I'll be right here, he promised, however long it takes. The simple statement, so ordinary in most circumstances, carried extra weight given our history. I nodded acknowledgement, not trusting myself to speak, and followed Linda into the inner sanctum of the radiation department. The treatment itself was anticlimactic, clinical, precise, and mercifully brief. The massive machine hummed and rotated around my carefully positioned body, delivering invisible doses of carefully calibrated radiation to the rebellious cells threatening my existence. The small tattoos, tiny permanent dots marking the treatment field, felt strangely significant, a visible reminder that cancer had permanently marked me, regardless of outcome. When I emerged an hour later, Daniel was exactly where he'd promised to be, leafing through outdated magazines in the waiting area. He looked up immediately, setting aside a dog-eared copy of National Geographic. "How was it?" he asked, rising to meet me. "Quick. Painless." I gestured to the small bandages covering my new tattoo marks. They said the side effects take time to develop. He nodded, retrieving my coat from the chair beside him. I researched radiation dermatitis. There are specific lotions recommended for minimizing skin damage. I can pick some up on the way home. The thoughtfulness of this practical gesture touched me unexpectedly. "Thank you, that would be helpful." As we walked toward the parking lot, I felt a sudden wave of fatigue wash over me. Not from the radiation itself, which wouldn't produce physical effects for days or weeks, but from the emotional weight of everything the treatment represented. Daniel must have noticed my steps falter because he gently took my elbow, steadying me without comment. The drive home passed in silence, but it wasn't the tense, awkward quiet of recent interactions. Instead, it felt like the comfortable silence of people who didn't need to fill every moment with words, a small echo of what we'd once shared. When we arrived home, Maria was waiting, having let herself in with the key I'd provided during her orientation. The house smelled of something savory cooking. Beds had been made, and a basket of folded laundry sat neatly on the coffee table. The practical comfort of these simple domestic tasks nearly brought me to tears. "How did it go?" Maria asked, her calm efficiency creating space for whatever response I might need to give. "Fine," I said, suddenly too exhausted to elaborate. "I think I need to rest for a while." Daniel hovered uncertainly in the doorway, clearly unsure of his role now that we'd returned to my domain. "I'll get those lotions and drop them by later," he said finally. "Unless you need anything else right now?" I shook my head, managing a small smile of gratitude. The ride was enough. Thank you. After he left, Maria helped me upstairs, her support matter of fact rather than pitying. The first day is always the hardest. she observed, turning down my bed covers. Not physically, but emotionally. It's a milestone no one wants to reach. I sank onto the bed, struck by her perceptiveness. You've done this before. Many times, she confirmed. 17 years as an oncology nurse before switching to home health. I've walked this path with hundreds of patients. And how many of them? I trailed off, unable to complete the question that haunted my darkest moments. Maria sat beside me, her expression gentle but direct. Many survive, some don't. But every single one finds strength they never knew they had. She patted my hand. Rest now. Nathan will be home in 3 hours. Sleep claimed me immediately, a deep, dreamless respite from conscious worry. When I woke, the quality of light had changed. Late afternoon sun slanting through the blinds, painting golden stripes across my bedroom floor. I lay still for a moment, taking inventory of physical sensations. No nausea today. No bone-deep ache. Just the familiar fatigue that never quite lifted, regardless of how much I slept. Downstairs, I found Maria supervising Nathan's homework at the kitchen table while simultaneously preparing dinner. She'd integrated herself into our household with remarkable ease, finding the delicate balance between helpful presence and respectful distance. "Mom!" Nathan exclaimed when I appeared. "You're up. Maria said I shouldn't wake you, but I wanted to ask how your radiation was." I joined them at the table, accepting the cup of tea Maria silently offered. It was very quick, actually. Not scary at all. The machine makes weird noises, but it doesn't hurt. Dad said they gave you tattoos. Nathan's expression was equal parts fascination and concern. Are they cool tattoos? Can I see them? I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd managed in days. They're just tiny dots, sweetie, like freckles, not cool dragon tattoos or anything exciting. Oh. His disappointment was comical. Dad made them sound cooler. The casual mention of Daniel hit differently now, after his unexpected support this morning. Did Dad call you? Nathan nodded, returning to his math worksheet. He said he's bringing special lotion for you later and wants to know if I want to come with him to pick out ice cream. The transparent attempt to combine practical help with father-son time was so typically Daniel that I couldn't help but smile. Even in our fractured family arrangement, he was trying to create normalcy for Nathan within the new constraints. That sounds nice, I said carefully. As long as your homework is finished. Maria caught my eye across the table, her expression professionally neutral, but somehow conveying approval of this measured response. She'd witnessed enough family dynamics during illness to recognize when small steps toward functional co-parenting were occurring. The doorbell rang an hour later, just as we were finishing dinner. Nathan ran to answer it, returning with Daniel, who carried a pharmacy bag in one hand and an elaborate ice cream cake in the other. I thought maybe a celebration was in order, he explained, looking slightly embarrassed by his own gesture. For getting through the first treatment. Maria smoothly cleared dinner dishes, creating space for this unexpected family moment while maintaining a respectful distance. As she set out plates for dessert, I caught her subtle nod of approval. Celebration rituals, marking milestones, acknowledging hard things accomplished, were an important part of the cancer journey, a way of measuring progress when the destination remained uncertain. "Can we eat it now?" Nathan asked eagerly, eyeing the cake's chocolate ganache coating. "Of course," I said, seeing no reason to deny this small pleasure. "But everyone gets a reasonable slice. We're not eating the whole thing tonight." As Daniel served the cake with ceremonial flourish, I was struck by the strange normalcy of the moment. The three of us gathered around the kitchen table, sharing dessert as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had changed, irrevocably. Daniel no longer lived here. Cancer had taken up residence in my body. Our family unit had been fundamentally altered. And yet, here we were, finding new patterns of connection within those changed circumstances. Later, after Nathan had gone upstairs to get ready for bed, Daniel lingered in the kitchen, helping with cleanup despite my assurances that it wasn't necessary. "I'd like to take you to Friday's appointment too," he said as he dried the last. "If that works for you." I considered the offer, weighing my need for independence against the practical benefits of his help. "All right," I agreed finally. "But I don't expect you to drive me to every appointment. You have work, and I have other people who can help." "I know." He returned the plate to its cabinet, movements familiar from years of shared domesticity. "I'm not trying to. I just want to do what I can, where I can." The simplicity of this statement, its lack of grand promises or dramatic declarations, felt honest in a way our recent interactions hadn't. Daniel wasn't promising to be everything I needed. He was offering what he could actually provide, with clear-eyed recognition of his limitations. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "Nathan does too." He nodded, gathering his keys from the counter. "I should go. Megan's waiting." The mention of her name still stung, a reminder of the life he'd chosen instead of fighting alongside me. But the pain felt duller now, less immediate. Perhaps that was progress. Or perhaps it was simply that my energy for resentment had been redirected toward the more pressing battle against cancer. "Thank you for the cake," I said, walking him to the door. It was a nice gesture. He paused on the threshold, turning back with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Jennifer, He stopped, seeming to reconsider whatever he'd been about. To say, "I hope you sleep well tonight." After he left, I sat on the porch swing, watching the last colors of sunset fade from the sky. 1 treatment down, 29 to go. An uncertain future stretching beyond that. Remission or recurrence, survival or shortened time, fears realized or fears conquered. But also, one day successfully navigated. Small moments of joy preserved for Nathan. New patterns of support, taking shape around me. The cancer story wasn't just about illness and betrayal, it was also about resilience, about unexpected strengths revealed through crisis. Tomorrow would bring another treatment, another day of fatigue, another set of challenges to navigate. But tonight, sitting in the gathering darkness with the taste of chocolate still lingering, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of healing, not just physical recovery, but the deeper healing of a life reconfigured by necessity and gradually rebuilt by choice. The insurance policy Daniel had overlooked might have given me financial leverage when he left, but the true policy I was cashing in now was the one I'd written myself through decades of building friendships, community, connections, and inner strength. That was the true safety net catching me as I fell, not legal clauses or financial provisions, but the invisible web of relationships and personal resilience that had been there all along, waiting to be tested. Tomorrow's radiation would target the cancer, but today's small victory had nourished something equally important. Hope. That stubborn light that refuses to be extinguished even in the darkest circumstances. 1 treatment at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 small celebration at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.